Okay, first of all, good evening, everyone. We have a fascinating parasha. We have a more intimate crowd today. And there's a Crystal Nacht event supposedly happening now. So people told me they'll be going to that. We have a fascinating parasha, like all of Bereshit. I always open up every week that there's so much to learn from, so much to discuss. And I want to share with you a little bit of try and understand something a little bit deeper. Let's try and cover some of the most basic elements of the parasha and see if we can delve to the next level. So I'm just going to share my screen. There we go. There we go. Okay, you can see the screen? Okay. Okay, so the central theme of this parasha is really the whole, well, let's quickly go from the beginning. The beginning is obviously that Rivka is pregnant. She doesn't know what's going on. And she finds out she has twins. And lo and behold, she gets a bracha from Hashem. Rashi says, Lebet Midrasho Shel Shem. She went to figure out what's going on. And he tells her, you should know, you have two children, and it's actually twins. All right, we know they grow up. A bit of a break with the whole story with Avimelech, the wells, the digging of the wells, the peace treaty, and then we get to basically the famous part of the parasha. And that is the brachot, where Yitzchak is going to give over the blessings from the blessings. Let's talk about the blessings. So we'll talk about from where soon. But she's going to give over the blessing. And at that same time, Rivka gets wind of this. He wants to give this. Sorry, 1 second. Someone's trying to come in. Yeah. So, Yitzchak wants to give the blessing to Esav, his Bechor, his firstborn. He's his eyesight's not great. And Rivka gets wind of this. And she does a whole story to make sure that Esav doesn't get it, and Yaakov ends up getting it. There's a whole trick. We know the story. And ultimately, Yaakov gets the blessings. Elohim. Incredible blessings. Esav eventually comes in, just as Yaakov finishes, and he comes in ready to get the bracha. And suddenly, Yitzchak says, "What do you mean? I can't give you a bracha." So, who just came in? He realizes he's being deceived. He really cries out. He asks, he says, "Please, Dad, give me a bracha as well." And Yitzchak says, "Sorry, but I'll give you a certain, a minimum bracha." And then Esav is really got this murderous revenge. He said, "I'm going to wait for my father to die, and then I'm going to kill my brother." And Rivka gets wind of that, and ultimately she speaks to Yitzchak, tells him, "Listen, it's time for our son to get married, and send him away from here." And that's what she does. He sends him and gets the blessing of Yitzchak, and we move on to next week's parasha with Vayetze Yaakov. Yaakov leaves, and he, the story of the dream with the ladder and all that. That's next week's parasha. That's pretty much the parasha in a nutshell. So I want to discuss a couple of points, and because we're a smaller crowd today, I want to actually get your input on some of these points, and we'll see where we'll go with this, because there's so many talking points where we can go, and so many questions which we need to handle. So let's see what we can cover today. So just let's quickly point out the actual psukim. But what's very clearly visible is there's a difference between Yitzchak's approach and Rivka's approach. Yitzchak seemingly believes that Esav is the good guy, and Esav deserves the brachot, the blessings. And Rivka believes that Yitzchak's been hoodwinked, and it's actually Yaakov is supposed to get the blessings, and that's why she does her whole shtick. So let's just go through the psukim. First of all, pasuk, Perek Chafei, pasuk Chavchet, 25-28. Vayehav Yitzchak et Esav. Source 1, Kitzayid Befiv. Yitzchak favored Esav because he had a taste for game, whatever that means. Rivka ohevet Yaakov. But Rivka favored Yaakov. So simply put, Kitzayid Befiv, the Mefarshim explain, commentators explain, Kitzayid Befiv means that he had a way with his tongue. He was able to, Rashi says, Shayatzad oto meramehu bidvarav. He was able to kind of have this smooth tongue, this smooth talk, and pretend like he's this great tzaddik, great guy, and he would ask all these fascinating questions to his father, pretending that if he's really interested, then he would go out the front door and do who knows what. So that's, an explicit pasuk in the Torah of the difference in opinion. Okay.
Going back to this pasuk, Rabbi, this was a very disturbing situation because now you make a difference between the two children.
Oh.
And so it doesn't bring harmony into the family.
Oh, so
that's a lot of problem.
That's a very good point. Although it's a famous discussion point, because we learn a lot of things out of the relationship between Yitzchak and Rivka. She had to deceive him. We'll talk about that a little bit shortly. Also, the family dynamics over here is kind of strange. And like you said, the difference between Yaakov is treated and Esav is treated, right? And the way father takes one position, mother takes another position. There seems to be a lot of family dynamics going on over here. From a family systems perspective, there's lots of work to be done. But, the difference between one child versus another, they say, Chanoch lenar al pi darko. The Montessori method is an ancient method. Shlomo Melech said it 2,500 years ago. Yeah, that a person has to make sure to not, copy and paste, no cookie cutter system. And that in chinuch, in the world of education, people have to know that every child's got their own unique capabilities, and you don't try to put, one size fits all. That's a complete disaster. And, if you're already talking like that, then maybe we should kind of, jump into the next concept, that the truth is, in terms of Yitzchak, he came up with this exactly that. He said, Yaakov is a big tzaddik. Okay, he's sitting in the Beth Midrash. But simply put, Esav, we know what he's like. Esav is he's an outdoors boy. He likes to fight, he likes to hunt, he likes to do different things. He doesn't fit in the box of sitting in Beth Midrash all day. So now what? How should we approach this, challenge? So Yitzchak says, I'm going to go and bring him closer a different way. So let's hold on to that for a second. That there seems to be a very straight world approach, a world view to chinuch, I suppose, between Yitzchak and Rivka. Yeah.
Rabbi, a question. No, you have to. Okay.
Muted, yeah. Yeah, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry, Rabbi.
Okay, yeah. You have to go to a different room, I think.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Is there any connection to the fact that Cain was also a hunter? Is Esav somehow connected to this kind of profession?
It's a very interesting question.
Yeah,
the only thing I can think of the top
What are you saying?
The only thing I can think of on the top of my head is we know that Yitzchak had special clothes. It's Bigdei Achamudot. Rashi brings that he kept his special hunter's clothes by his mother. And that's why Rivka gives over Esav's clothes to Yaakov so that he can go and get the brachot, right? So when Yaakov is being felt, he's got these special clothes. And the question is where those clothes are actually coming from. They were very unique clothes.
I'm not sure. Did you hear my question, Rabbi?
Yeah. Is there any connection from Cain to Esav?
Yeah, the fact that the profession of hunting, killing, actually taking life compared to a person that is like Hevel and like Yaakov are actually not, they're more connected to, to nature, but they're not taking life. I'm not sure, I'm just thinking about the connection.
No, so I'm saying the only connection I can think of in terms of the cloak, in terms of the clothes, was the Midrash brings that Adam Arishon got from Hashem, he got a certain type of like magical coat, and this coat would attract the animals, and eventually it was handed down to Noach and so on and so forth until Nimrod gets his hands on this coat, and he steals it, and eventually Esav gets it from Nimrod. So I think the Midrash says he kills Nimrod, and actually he takes these clothes, and this was very special, so he actually held it by his mother instead of by his wives, because he didn't trust his wives either, ironically enough. So, but that's a more of a Midrash type of idea. I think you raise an interesting point. There must be some sort of connection that we do find that Esav has this kind of outdoor connection, connected to wildlife and connected to, being out there, but versus, with Esav versus like the other approach of the other, patriarchs. Interesting point has to be looked at. So let's just continue with the psukim. Try and figure out the breakdown, and then we'll tackle with a couple of questions. Vayiki zaken Yitzchak. So Yitzchak was old, but tichena enav mirot, and his eyes were too dim to see. Okay, so he's going blind. He is blind already. Vayikra et Esav beno hagadol vayom elav bni vayom elav bnei. Calls the older son Esav. He said to him, "My son," he answered, "Here I am." ויום הנה זקנתי לדעת יום פתי, ואתה שם לכליך וקשתך קצת ותן קצת ציד, ועשה לי מצמים כאשר אהבתי, אביה לי ואוכלה בעבור, תברכך נפשי בצלם עמוד. So he basically tells his elder son, go out, go bring me some food, so that I can actually give you a blessing before I die. All right. Next pasuk. ורבקה שומעת בדבר יצחק אל עשיו בנו. Sorry, someone want to say something? No?
Yeah. תמשיך.
Yeah. וילך עשיו השדה לצוד ציד להביא. And the pasuk continues that Rivka turns around to Yaakov and says, listen, הנה שמעתי את אביך מדבר אל עשיו אחיך לאמור. He says he wants to give him a blessing. ואתה בנשמע בקולי לאשר נמצא באותך. Listen, my son, I want you to do what I'm going to tell you. Take 2 goats. I'm going to make them nice for you, like your father likes it. Favorite recipe. Bring them to your father to eat in order that he may bless you just before he dies. Yaakov ורבקה עמו, הן עשיו אחי איש שיער, ואנוכי איש חלק. He said, listen, I've got a problem. Esav is a hairy guy, and I'm very smooth. אולי אם יושני אבי והייתי בעיניו מתעתע, והביאתי עליי כללה בברכה, טוב לאמו עליי כלילת חבני, אח שמה, וקוראים כך, לך, קח לי ברכה. Close the door, please. Thank you. Sorry. So there seems to be again, Rivka is going to do something out of this world, and she's going to basically challenge her husband's position and not speak to him directly, but just kind of go behind his back and get Yaakov to figure out how he's going to be able to get these brachot. So let's just begin with the idea of Vayiki zaken Yitzchak v'tichena einav mirot. So what does that mean? That his eyes were blind? Is that a metaphoric idea? Is that a physical idea? What was your understanding?
Cataract.
He could distinguish between his children from the smell of the field.
A physical thing, a physical problem, he was blind. Okay. Now, let me ask you this. Before we get to the difference of, Yitzchak and Rivka, what brachot are we talking about over here? What blessings are they arguing about?
Well,
Yeah.
I have the blessing here.
The blessing,
Pasuk 28, 28.
No, fill us in.
הוא אומר, ויתן לך האלוהים מטל השמיים ומשמני הארץ.
But what was special about these brachot? Was it just a regular bracha from a tzaddik like Yitzchak? I mean,
no.
I would go get a blessing from Yitzchak if he was around.
He says, "Tevachcha nafshi." He said that his soul will bless him
Okay, but
before he dies, like
No,
before.
is this the regular Friday night bracha of a father to a son?
no, it's actually the bracha here is giving the torch to the next generation and continue God's plan. This is basically the promise, right?
Right. So this is basically the transmission of, like Eliel saying, the torch from one generation to another generation. Basically, what Yitzchak is handing down the bracha which Abraham gave him to go on to the next generation.
Correct.
And then we know this carries on. Yaakov gives it to his children, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
I saw something fascinating today, which I never saw before. And I think it also kind of puts a whole spin on this whole discussion about Yitzchak and Rivka. So it's quite understandable that we'll get to the whole discussion of Yitzchak versus Rivka in a minute, but it's quite understandable if for whatever reason Rivka can't communicate with Yitzchak, then this is a very serious matter because Yitzchak seemingly has it all wrong, and Rivka wants to make sure that the ownership of these blessings are going to be given over to its rightful heir, who is, in her opinion, Yaakov. So she does this whole thing, and Yaakov ends up getting the brachot. So far, so good? Okay. Here's a technical snag. If you look at the brachot, Yitzchak, right at the end of the parasha, after the whole story happened, Yitzchak sends him away to go and find a wife. And he then gives him a bracha. V'yikra Yitzchak liYaakov, this is chapter Chavchet, pasuk Aleph, v'yivarech oto, and he gives him a blessing. V'yitzaveh v'yomer lo tikach sham lot Canaan, don't take a wife from the Canaanite women. Sounds like last week's parasha, remember? Abraham instructing Eliezer to make sure that Yitzchak won't get a wife from the Canaanites. Okay, kumlech Paden Aram, again like last week's parasha, go to the house of Betuel, Aviyemecha, your mother's father, V'kach chamisham, V'kach chamisham misham lot Lavan Achiyemecha. Until we said last week it died, go take a wife from the daughters of Lavan, your uncle. He's already given the blessing, he's already a few psukim ago. וייתן לך את ברכת אברהם, לך ולזרעך איתך, ולאשתך את ארץ מגוריך, אשר נתן אלוהים לאברהם. May he grant you the blessings of Abraham, to you and your offspring, that you may possess the land where you are sojourning, which God assigned to Abraham. Seems very explicit over here that the Birkat Avraham, the transmission of the torch, the giving over, is not the V'yitel lecha Elohim, which we kind of base our understanding of the story, whereby Yaakov gets the blessings from Yitzchak instead of Esav. No, this is long after brachot being given. Yitzchak is well aware of what's going on, and now he's giving this Birkat Avraham. So, besides for the astonishing revelation that the previous brachot are not the Birkat Avraham, but there seems to be that Rivka actually had cooked up this whole plan and she just got it all wrong. Because she's thinking that she's got to, by hook or by crook, get this brachot to Yaakov. Meanwhile, the brachot which Yitzchak was giving Esav was nothing to do with the Birkat Avraham. It's a very interesting idea, which kind of may shed some light onto the whole story. But we're getting ahead of ourselves, so let's try and go back a little bit. What would you say, how would you explain the simple understanding, the difference between Yitzchak's approach and Yaakov's approach? Dan just said that Yitzchak was blind. He kind of just didn't get it. Esav is, pulling a fast one on him. He's got a smooth tongue. And he comes to his father, asks him all these rabbinical questions. Sounds like a big tzaddik. Then he goes outside, does who knows what. Meanwhile, Yaakov is a sweet little tzaddik, sitting, quiet, meek little guy. And he's not getting he's getting the raw end of the deal. So Rivka, who's, brought up in a house of Lavan, Betuel, she's got this savviness to her. She says, listen, Yaakov, you got to get this right. Let's do it from the back door, and you're going to get the brachot. But would you say that Yitzchak just kind of gets it wrong, and Rivka just the fact that she's more cunning, the fact that she can actually physically see what's going on, kind of gets it right? Or would you think there's maybe a different approach over here? Has anyone got any insight to that?
Is it possible that Yitzchak's eyes are, someone is helping him not to see well?
Okay, so Rashi brings actually three different explanations why. Rashi says, I only brought one over here. Bashanat shel Elu. We'll get that in a minute. Esav's wives were busy serving idol worship, and the incense from the idol worship basically messed up with his eyes. The greater a person is, the greater the sensitivity of a person. Yitzchak was so great that this idol worship kind of really messed with his eyes. That's one pshat in Rashi. The second one, Rashi brings a midrash that in the times of Akedah, then the malachim were crying, and the tears fell into the eyes of Yitzchak, and that ultimately caused the blindness later on in his life. And the third idea in Rashi, he says, a bit like what Eyal was saying, that it's purely was navigated from above, simply to make sure that Yaakov gets the blessing instead of Esav. Wouldn't he be blind? Yaakov comes in, he says, who are you? Yeah, what do you want? I'm giving brachot to Esav. He's got kind of his mind pretty straightforward over here.
Well, Yaakov קיבל את הברכה במרמה. He was unjustly.
Right. Dan, but there's a chance that Rabbi says that the
אין הצדקה שמה שרבקה עשתה.
No, but Yitzchak didn't, he said, I'll give you my blessing, but he didn't say the blessing of Abraham. So maybe it's just, if Rivka is very active to deceive him, but maybe there was no need,
So it's actually interesting, Dan, that you bring out that point. You said Enat Stakan. Maybe we'll see if by the end of today, maybe there's a bit of a different approach. But if you look at Pasuk Lamed Hey, Vayomer ba achicha bemirma, vayikach brichatecha. So Esav comes in, he suddenly realizes that his brachot being snatched away from him, whatever brachot they were. And he says, please give me a bracha. Vayomer laviv barcheni gam ani avi. Vayomer ba achicha bemirma, vayikach brichatecha. So Dan just translated that. He was deceived and he was cheated out of his brachot. Funny enough, in Targum Onkelos, he doesn't translate the word bemirma as deceit. And Rashi quotes this as well. Bemirma, says the Targum, bechochmata. Rashi, bechochma. He came with a certain cleverness and smartness.
Cunning.
Cunning, thank you. But cunning is usually a negative connotation. This is doesn't necessarily mean negative. Let's hang on to that a second, because maybe something else will be we'll shine a light on that soon. But I want to challenge this assumption that if we think that Yitzchak was this, old guy who's kind of, oblivious to his surroundings, he's no idea, Yitzchak's Esau's putting a fast one on him, and he just no idea. And Rivka just sees Esau for who he is. So here's the thing: if you look at the pasuk, Perek Chavav pasuk Lamed Dalet, Vahi Esau ben 40 shana. Esau turns 40. Oh, time for celebration. Vayikach את יהודית בת בארי החיתי, ואת בוסמת בת אלון החיתי. He takes 2 women, ותהיינה מורת רוח ליצחק ולרבקה. And they were a source of bitterness to Yitzchak and Rivka.
That's something, it's very, very unusual.
This is very telling. One second. Next pasuk, he turns blind. On that, says Rashi, that is the connection between this pasuk of where Yitzchak gets blind and the last pasuk, because he's getting blind as a result of the types of women that Esav goes and gets married to are idol worship, women who serve idol worship. And it seems to be, and it's like the guy smoking in a house, and suddenly he can't. The guy gets something problem with his lungs. So Yitzchak had obviously a spiritual ailment which turned into a physical ailment, spiritual sensitivity which turned to a physical ailment, namely his eyes. But I think it's very clear from this pasuk that Yitzchak knows exactly what's going on. Now you can imagine if you think that Esav is this big tzaddik, but he's got 2 women who are really, idol worshippers, not doing very well, it's kind of telling, even if he's physically blind, what sort of level Esav himself is at. And here it says explicitly, not just to Rivka, that he was causing a source of discomfort, of bitterness, but both to Yitzchak and Rivka. So here they seem to be very much on the same page of exactly where Esav is at. Yet, they have a very different approach. So what's going on, Eyal?
Well, this is a very, I didn't remember this thing,
Well, that's what we're here to learn new things every year.
I didn't remember because it's very obvious that Esav, Yitzchak and Yaakov are getting this kind of matchmaking. They're very careful. They're choosing their partners, the partners they're chosen for them, very carefully. It's very important to continue the line of Jewish growth, Jewish families. And Esav is not just taking one non-Jewish woman, he's taken 2, which is very unusual. And it looks like he's doing it by himself. He's not really go through any of the process that Yitzchak went through, and then Yaakov after that. So it already shows you that it's not the same thing.
So actually, Rashi points out something very interesting. Rashi says, Vayhi Esav, why did the pasuk say suddenly Esav is 40 years old and he takes these women? Like, what suddenly changed? He's busy messing around all day. Suddenly he's 40 years old. Okay, now time to settle down. Right? Rashi says something else. I'll read you the Rashi. Ben 40 shana, Esav haya nimshal lechazir. Esav is likened to a pig. Shnemar yechasemeh lechazir miyar. Brings the pasuk in Tehillim. החזיר הזה, כשהוא שוחט, פושט טלפיו לומר, ראו שאני טהור. We know for a kosher animal to be, or any animal because it's kosher, need 2 signs. You need split hooves and chewing the cud. There are very few animals that have one of the signs and not the other. That means if you usually have split hooves, you're usually going to be chewing the cud. But there's only a few animals. I think there's a few animals which kind of is a bit of a misnomer. One of them is the pig. The pig has split hooves, but doesn't chew the cud. So Rashi says the pig, it puts out its hooves, and it makes it out as if he's kosher, but really he's not kosher because internally, what's going on? This whole concept of chewing the cud is the internal, metaphor for the internal work. that's not really happening. So he's showing everyone what a big tzaddik I am, and really, inside he's really corrupt. Esav was the same person. כך אלו גוזלים וחומסים ומראים עצמם קשרים. כל מהם שנה היה צד נשים מתחת יד בעליהם ומענה אותם. 40 years, Esav is messing around with different women, taking women who are married and sitting with them and abusing them. Rashi says, כשהבן מם, when he was 40 years old, אמר, אבא בן מם שנה נשא אישה, אף אני כן. Brings from the drash. He says, Abba, Yitzchak, when he was the age of 40, he went to find a wife, he found Rivka. So I'm going to do the same. As if to say, like, I'm a big righteous guy, I'm going to be like my father. What's the connection between you and your father? You're terrible Rasha, and your father's a great tzaddik, but you're going to make as if, now you're 40 years old, now I'm going to be the big tzaddik. So, to your point, Esav is not quite the great guy which he pretends to portray, to at least to his father. But what seems very clear is, did Yitzchak get wind of this? Yes, Yitzchak knew very well who Esav and what Esav is all about. Yet, he has a very different approach. So what is that approach? What is that system? So we mentioned there's many different discussions exactly about, even spiritual ideas, and the famous one of Yitzchak had a whole plan that Esav and Yaakov will work in tandem as partners, and Yaakov will be the Torah guy. It will be like Yisachar Zvulun in that partnership. One will study Torah, the other one will support him. So Esav will be using his talents outside in the field to go and bring Parnasayin, and Yaakov will use his talents in the Bet Midrash to go and teach Torah. But Rivka realized that's not going to work, because Esav is just going to be greedy and not share anything with his brother. So that's why she did what she did. There's many different aspects to it. There's many different lessons from a psychological level, from the family level, from the relationship between Yitzchak and Rivka. But I don't really want to go into that today. I want to go up a little bit with different streets today. So let's go back a little bit to the beginning of the parasha, which we mentioned. ויאהב יצחק את עשיו כי ציד בפיו. ורבקה אוהבת יעקב. Yitzchak finds favor, Esav finds favor in the eyes of Yitzchak, and Yitzchak really loves him. Why? Because he has a taste for game. Rivka ohevet Yaakov, and Rivka favors Yaakov. Anything strange in this pasuk, or anything not consistent in this pasuk?
Yeah, it's the reason that he likes Esav. It's not really a reason as a parent to love your kid, because he likes the food that that Esav brings. It's
so Rashi said Kitzad the favor because he's got the smooth tongue. He's able to really get away with his all sorts of questions to his father. His father's blind, right?
Yeah.
But and don't forget, Vayehev Yitzchak Esav, it doesn't necessarily mean that he dislikes Yaakov.
Also, the order of the words, there's sort of the sentence is jarred in the middle. Vayehav Yitzchak et Esav, but Rivka ohevet et Yaakov. So that there's no use. That it's not vatohav et Yaakov. Vayehav Yitzchak. So the verb is used differently, right? So right away we're introduced to this kind of dissonance, to sort of this disharmony between the two. It's introduced right away in that first.
Where do you see that in the pasuk again?
Well, first of all, the word order, Vayehav Yitzchak et Esav, but Rivka ohevet, as opposed to Vayehav, it should be for Rivka, it should vatohav. Right, so the use of the verb, the form of the verb, is not the same.
Yeah, but in Hebrew, that's what.
And also, the verb comes first, and then Yitzchak, Vayehav et Yitzchak. But for Rivka, it's Rivka ohevet. So there's something like we're sensing this kind of there's a problem introduced here. There's a conflict.
Are you suggesting that Yitzchak is in the past tense, like Yitzchak had this love for Esav as opposed to Rivka, who's kind of a consistent love?
Present, yeah.
It doesn't come through in the English translation. Favored Esav, favored Jacob, we see the same tense, but in
No.
verb tense, but in Hebrew, it's different.
It should be Rivka Ahava et Yaakov if it's in the past.
But it should be Vatohav Rivka et
Yaakov,
Yaakov.
Yaakov, something in the past tense, right? That's a very interesting point. Good. Okay, I like that. Anything else?
There's a lot of use of senses here. There are a lot of hidden identities. There's people listening in, what we're introduced to listening on the sly. We're tasting, we're feeling, right? We're feeling, but not really able to discern identities because everything's turned upside down. There are hidden identities here. What aren't we? So the identities are hidden, but beyond the fact that they're hidden and therefore we can't see them, we're right away introduced to the physical kind of deterioration of sight in Yitzchak. Now, is it physical? It's the physical sight, or is it something, larger than that?
What is strange about this sentence is that it doesn't say ואוהב יצחק את עשיו יותר מיעקב, and Rivka אוהבת את יעקב יותר מעשיו. It just says that he likes Esav and that's it, and Rivka אוהבת יעקב and that's it. Like there's nothing about.
So maybe there's a favorite over here. Like if you ask me, don't forget they're twins. Right?
She doesn't display why she like Yaakov better.
Also, you're right. And
that's a point I was trying to drive at.
Right. So there's
Look
an inequality.
Yitzchak et Esav. Why? Now, Eyal doesn't like the reasoning, but there seems to be a reason given over here. Maybe we don't have the complete understanding what Kitzai B'Piv means. The fact that Rashi has to deal with it means there's some issue over there.
Yeah,
but the next part of the pasuk, where Rivka ohevet Yaakov, it doesn't give a reason why she loves Yaakov.
You know why? Because Rivka's love is stronger.
It's unconditional.
Unconditional.
Yeah. Yeah.
She doesn't need to have a reason. She loves him because it's her son, and the other one, he loves him because there's something.
He like for the food.
Yeah.
But what we don't like is that each of them is siding with one of them, but we don't get a sense that they loved their kids. That they loved them.
Is that a fair statement? Here's the thing. We said before, just because Yitzchak likes Esau doesn't mean he dislikes Yaakov. It could be there's more of an emphasis.
Except we'll all agree that nothing appears in the Torah as stam. We're not going to it's written. We're not told that he loved Esav just because. It's not random.
But let's take it to the next level. The fact that the Torah says it, like you're pointing out, is clearly and that there's this whole kind of hidden dance between Yitzchak and Rivka about who should get the brachot. Seems to be this whole world approaches here. And it's not just about bad parenting, chas v'shalom. Right? And rule number one in parenting, everyone knows, is don't treat your kids differently. You even want to give a compliment to one child, don't necessarily do it, praise and embellish the child and raise them up in front of the other kids, because
it's strange because it's almost as if Rivka has an understanding of the imperative of carrying out the Birkat Zera, Birkat Aretz, what's promised to Avraham. It's almost as if she's the one here in the story. Yitzchak literally doesn't see the light. He doesn't see who should be the one actually carrying on the shalshelet, right? Carrying on this bracha. And the story presents it as it's Rivka who understands this is really what needs to happen. It's Yaakov who's most suited.
So, but let's go back to what we said before. The mere fact that Yitzchak is very well aware of Esav's spiritual standing, and especially if we say that Yitzchak doesn't necessarily only like Esav, he's very well aware of Yaakov's spiritual standing. And if we're talking about who's who and what's what, who's going to get the bracha, whether it's the Birkat Avraham or whether it's the Birkat Hazera, as you called it, or whatever it is, clearly Yitzchak knew where Esav is holding, and yet he still felt that Esav should get the brachot, as opposed to Rivka, who felt that Yaakov should be the one getting the brachot.
You know,
Mhm.
it's also interesting because Yaakov did the same thing with Yosef.
Oh, that's a very, very good point.
You know, Avraham, tell me, Rabbi, did Avraham say anywhere that he liked Yitzchak more than Ishmael?
Yeah, ki b'Yitzchak kareh lechazara.
No, actually, we're
Mm.
left with the impression that he was very hurt
Last
and
week was very
bothered
good.
by the
Alodot,
fact
no.
that
Weeks.
Hagar was sent, that Sarah wanted to banish Hagar. We're sensing from the text that it did not sit well with Avraham,
Yeah.
but God claimed to take care of Hagar.
That's right. Although the pasuk does say ki b'Yitzchak kareh lechazara. So you know,
There's this kind of duality here. Like we're
Yeah.
presented with Yaakov ve'Esav in the same way, kind of in Bereshit, in Parashat Bereshit, we're introduced to Cain and Hevel. And it's kind of like you ask, why is this occurring? Why are we presented with this profound conflict
And also
between
Yaakov and
brothers?
Yosef,
Why?
you know. Yaakov and
Sorry?
Yosef too.
And also with Ephraim and Menashe.
yeah, well, they're the opposite of that, right? But the
Yeah,
brothers,
yeah.
the Shvatim with Yosef, right? That's the most striking contrast.
Mhm.
Look, if
But
oh,
maybe,
on.
maybe since we suspect that Yitzhak, anyway knew that Yaakov was better than Esav. He just favors Esav because at the time he was hungry and he wanted to eat, and maybe Esav was a better cook and all that. But maybe in the end, if it had worked
One
out
minute.
that
Can I just stop you there? That
Yeah.
is definitely not the case. We're not talking about someone who was missing some food and he was bored or he just wants a good meal. He says explicitly that the reason why he wants him to go give him food is ba'avur tevarechecha nafshi. That means there was a specific reason why he wanted to bring the food, to use it as almost as a catalyst to be able to bless him. So this is not definitely, we're talking about Yitzchak Avinu here. We're talking about our patriarchs. This is
okay.
we stand on their
So
shoulders. We're not talking about
Okay.
someone who's
Okay, granted. So suppose that was true and it actually happened that way, that Esav came to him first. What if in the end Yitzhak would have given Esav the blessing that Esav was supposed to get anyway, and that he would have given Yaakov the blessing that Yaakov was supposed to get anyway? Like in the end, the story is conveyed to us like in a very dramatic way, like this is how it happened. But what if Yitzhak was smart enough to know that in case Esav did show up first, then he would not have given Esav Yaakov's blessing anyway. Maybe it would have
well,
worked
I
out.
think that's exactly what Rivka was worried about. And I think this is a fight for the eternal rights. This is going to change the course of history. And Rivka is shouting, we can't let this happen. And Yitzchak seems to be oblivious to this, but yet not so oblivious to the reality. So he's obviously doing this on a conscious level. Yeah.
Rabbi,
Well,
the sentence that you said about Yitzchak and Rivka together are not happy about Esav's wives. I'm just thinking just differently. Is it possible that Yitzchak is acting here as if he doesn't really know, but he's sending Esav away, giving time to Yaakov to be there first, because Esav is busy, far away, and
But he didn't even let him know.
Hmm?
Look at the pasuk. What do we say? Rivka summons Yaakov. Hine shamati tavicha. Rivka shomat. She's the one who's sadly. She's like got her ear to the door. Ear to the ground always.
Is it possible that it's a plan that Rivka and Yitzchak actually partners?
Well, that seems like a very strange plan, because then they would have had straight communication. It seems to be the whole way around. Rivka's kind of doing everything cunningly to get around the fact that, and Yaakov, and look through the psukim later. Yitzchak does a very thorough check to make sure this is going to be Esav, because who's getting the brachot? Esav. Checks it. He keeps on second guessing. He says, I read the psukim.
Mm.
You go through all the psukim. Vayom Yitzchak Vayom Yaakov el pasuk Yudchet. Vayavo el Aviv Vayomer Aviv Vayom Enei Mayim Me'ata Bani. He says, who are you? Vayom Yaakov el Aviv Anochi Esav Bechorecha. Asiti kasher dibarti elai kum mashva. Vayom Yitzchak Vayom Ma ze miyat im tzavni? How come you came so fast? I just sent you out to the field. Kikram na'lefecha falai. Vayom Yitzchak, he still is not convinced it's actually Esav. Geshana va Meshcha Bani. Taze Bani Esav, you know, this is really you, Esav? I want to feel you. Vayigash Yaakov Yitzchak Aviv Meshu Vayom Kol Kol Yaakov Adayim Esav. He feels him. He says, 1 second, there's something wrong over here. Something doesn't feel right. Oh, it feels right, but it doesn't sound right. Yeah? Hayadayim Yidei Esav, Kol Kol Yaakov Adayim Esav. The voice is the voice of Yaakov. He's speaking about Baruch Hashem, stand, please, my father, I'm here. He cried on Elohecha lefanai. When they start talk like that, he's a vulgar person. This is Yaakov, the sweet tzaddik Yaakov. And then Alpam, is this really you, Esav? He said, I am. I said, I am who I am. That's what Esav. And he goes, and he gives him the blessings. Okay.
It's clear the guilty party is Rivka. She's a guilty.
So no, exactly. Eyal, your suggestion, this is a kind of a collaboration between Yitzchak and Rivka is from Sukkim, it doesn't seem like that at all. Okay, we've only got 8 minutes left. Let's see if we can discuss 3 questions. Let's just deal with 3 main questions, and we'll see if we can even attempt to decipher this a little bit. So first question is, Rivka, for whatever reason, doesn't agree with Yitzchak's position. She has a different worldview. She feels like she sees the reality. Yitzchak is maybe hoodwinked for some odd reason. Or even if Yitzchak has a different position, she doesn't agree with it. Okay. But first of all, we pointed out in the pasuk, she doesn't say why. She doesn't say why she loves Yaakov. Yitzchak, we know why he loves Esav. That's the pasuk. But what basis does Rivka have to start going and deceive Yitzchak? He's got one position, she's got a different position. They argue, fair enough. That's what people do. We can agree to disagree. Even in marriage, you can agree to disagree respectfully. But what basis is she going to turn around world history by some sort of whim that she feels like? Granted, we're talking about Rivka and Menu, but we're also talking about Yitzchak Avinu. And he's not some guy who's just, blind, a poor old guy. He's very well aware of what's going on. He's going to pass over the torch. Question number 1. Question number 2. Simply put, when Rivka go to Yitzchak, say, my dear husband, we need to have a conversation. I think you got this wrong. Have a chinuch session, have an education session. What's your approach to the worldview? What's my approach? I think this is it. Nothing, no communication. We've mentioned in the past the Netziv that suggests that Yitzchak and Rivka had a very different type of relationship between them as opposed to Abraham and Sarah and Yaakov and Rachel. Abraham and Sarah's got a problem. She screams at him, Chamati alecha. I've got a problem with you. Kick Ishmael out. Rachel, she doesn't have children. She starts screaming Yaakov. She says, Yaakov, why are you not praying? You're not praying enough. But when it comes to Rivka, she doesn't pick up the phone. She doesn't even go sit with Yitzchak and say, listen, you got this wrong. Question number 2. Question number 3 is what's very strange is if you look at what should happen. So Yaakov comes in, he deceives Yitzchak, b'mirma, whether you take b'chokhmah or not, whatever, but something was not done straight, that's clear. Whole discussion in its own right, how Yaakov could have done this, but that's to tend emet Yaakov, how that works with the concept of Yaakov being ish emet. That's a separate class. But there's a problem over here because seemingly when Yaakov leaves the room, in comes Esav, all happy Larry, coming in, Dad, Yakum Avi. This is real Esav style. Come on, Dad, get up. Come on, time to eat. All right. The only Yitzchak Abimiyata, he says, who are you? I am the real deal. I'm your oldest son. Suddenly Yitzchak realized he had been deceived. Another point, the yell, to show that it was not done in tandem. Who is this guy? Here we got the pasuk over here. Source number 6. Who was it then he demanded 100 game and brought it to me? Moreover, I ate of it before you came and I blessed him. Now, what should come the next part? I can't believe it. Oh gosh, I would never have given him a bracha if I would have known it was the wrong guy. He doesn't say that. He says, Gam Baruch Yeh. It's all good.
He can take it back. He can take the blessing back.
Doesn't take it back. Not only does he not take it back, he kind of puts a hefter on it. He says, you know what? Gam Baruch Yeh. It's all good. What? Next, you look further on the pasuk where now Yitzchak, Esav wants to threaten.
Yeah,
One second, hold on a second. Esav wants to kill Yaakov. Rivka gets wind of it, so she tells her husband to go and tell him to go get a wife from Lavan's house. Vayikra Yitzchak liYaakov vayivarech oto. And not only that, he gives him Birkat Abraham, like we said before. So the whole kind of shock doesn't change Yitzchak's opinion. Not only that, he calls him in and there's nothing. There's no even breakdown in relationship between Yitzchak and Yaakov. It's not like, Yaakov, how can you do this to me? All right, you get the bracha, but how could you have deceived me? What's going on? Linda, sorry.
Hello?
Anyone got something? Okay. All right, so we've got these 3 questions. Kind of is very difficult. These are only some of the questions, obviously, in this whole topic, besides for the whole approach between Yitzchak and Rivka, but it needs some sort of understanding of where Rivka is at, and basically what basis does she have not to speak to Yitzchak, not to even have any sort of communication, not to say what's the basis of her love, and on what whim does she act that she goes and sees Yitzchak. And then later on, Yitzchak doesn't even have any anger towards Yaakov for deceiving him. What's that play over here? So we have 2 minutes. Let's see if we can just give the Rashi Prakim, the idea. Let's rewind back to the very beginning of the parasha. So, they're praying hard for kids. They haven't had kids for 20 years. And they're praying for each other. Yitzchak's praying for Rivka. Rivka's praying for Yitzchak. Just a content tefillah whenever a person has a problem. If one prays for someone else, then the Gemara says they will be answered first. So Yitzchak had to pray for Rivka. Rivka prays for Yitzchak. That way they both praying for each other. They all get answered first. Either way, they finally have Rivka gets pregnant. All right, right at the beginning of the parasha. Rivka gets pregnant. Pasuk Chavbet 22. Children struggle in the womb. There's something very strange. This is not regular kicks of the baby within the womb. There's something extraordinary going on. Rashi already brings the midrash that every time she walked past a bet midrash, then Yaakov was kicking to go out, and every time she walked past a bet avodah zarah, Esav was kicking to go out. They all ask, what's going on over here? So Rivka says, what's the big deal? Okay, one's kicking this way, one's kicking that way. A child is so mixed up, it's not a good sign. If you're either one way or the other way, you want to be to this side or to that side, okay, but to be sometimes like this, something like that, it's kind of inconsistent. She goes and seeks out the guidance of Shem, Rashi says, the son of Noach, who's still around. But Yomer Adonai La, so he's obviously a Navi, he's giving Ruach HaKodesh, and he turns around to her and says, Shnei goyim v'itnech, you should know it's not one person who's mixed up. who's schizophrenic or some disorder, it's all good. A bipolar disorder, no. It's shnei goyim bebitnech. It's two separate people. You've got twins. And you've got two great nations which are going to come out of you. Two ushnei le'omim ma'achi paredu.
And
Ul'om mil'om yematz. The two separate people should live from your body, and one people should be mightier than the other.
and this pasuk doesn't appear between Ishmael.
No, because she literally didn't have twins. This was a very unique situation.
They didn't say two separate two people will create two different realms, two different
Nations, but out of these two people.
Here he said, but with Yitzhak and Ishmael, he didn't say that.
Well, later he says that. Later, God promises
Promise to Yitzhak
and Ishmael have a great nation.
Ishmael.
Yeah. But there seems to be another piece of information which Rivka gets over here, which seemingly is out of context. He says, listen, there are going to be two people, two nations, but Veravi Avot Tza'ir, and the older shall serve the younger. What is this piece of information, which seemingly has nothing to do with the question? What seems to be, Yitzhak is getting, well, we're running late, so I'm going to have to finish, but Rivka is getting a inside intel that there's going to be a situation, you're going to have two kids, and at a certain point, you're going to have to make a decision. And that decision will be who is going to be the rightful heir to pass on the torch.
That seems to be a theme that repeats itself. It repeats itself with Yitzchak and Ishmael. You could even say with Cain veHevel, and here we are again with Yaakov veEsav. That same theme.
And
two of them,
History repeats itself.
Yeah.
both of them vying for the blessing. Both of them vying. It has ramifications even today, you might say.
Even there's Yosef too, Yosef and his brothers.
Okay, we have to finish. So I'm just going to wrap up. But there seems to be that Rivka is working off not a whim of Ruach HaKodesh. She has some inside intel which Yitzchak did not have. So I saw someone today, he suggests that perhaps she didn't tell Yitzchak because Yitzchak didn't get this nevuah, it was Rivka that got nevuah. Perhaps she didn't tell him about this conversation when she went to Shem ben Noach and tried to figure out what's going on, and she finds out she got twins. But later on, when this whole thing happens, and she has to choose between the stuff that she knows, she has to make it happen. And she makes it happen.
But
He gets
why
the brachot. But just maybe, after he gets the brachot, then Rivka goes and shares the information with him. Rivka shares the information with Yitzchak.
But isn't it undermining Yitzchak, the fact that he is not even getting, God is not communicating with him at all?
Well, that's God's work at play. This had to happen in a certain way. We don't understand this. But there seems to be some more information here which we don't have. And it seems to be Rivka is working off some sort of Ruach HaKodesh. So I just want to finish off this.
Right.
I think
role, we underestimate the large role that these matriarchs play in the future and in, fulfilling the Brit.
Yes, with ultimately the power of the women, the matriarchs, that basically established Klal Yisrael for who they were, for who we are today, because of the inroads that Sarah made, that Rivka made, that Rachel made, that Leah made. This is huge, and this is like you all mentioned. It's a common theme going throughout Sefer Bereshit. But I think we'll stop there. There's so much more to talk about. Bezrat Hashem.
תודה רבה.
Okay.
תודה רבה.
Very interesting.
Thank